Iran and the United States agreed to a second meeting after their highest level exchange in years. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. Iran and the United States have scheduled a second round of negotiations for this weekend in Rome over Tehran's nuclear program. Both countries describe Saturday's indirect talks in Oman's capital of Muscat as positive and constructive. The talks are considered an important first step in establishing whether a new deal is attainable. We begin our coverage with this report from CGTN's Adel El-Makhrouki in Muscat.
U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Said Abbas Araghchi led the negotiations in Muscat, making it the highest level of talks between the two countries since 2018. The two delegations did not talk directly, though. Oman's foreign minister mediated the talks and said they were held in, quote, a friendly environment.
أهم تحدي هو عامل الثقة.
I think the biggest challenge is building trust between the two parties. That's the role Oman will focus on, because trust is almost non-existent between them. Both parties clearly want to reach a peaceful solution, not just to the nuclear deal, I believe, but also the Iranian missiles program, and navigation safety in the Red Sea from the Houthi threats, which Iran allegedly supports, will be part of these negotiations.
Ahead of the talks, U.S. President Trump gave Tehran a 2-month deadline to reach a new nuclear agreement. He also threatened to attack Iran if the talks fail.
Fire surrounds these talks. There have been escalations. There are clear threats from the United States. These threats may not facilitate the negotiations. Iran, on the other hand, has military powers. It has plans for its nuclear program. It's why Washington is now back to negotiating with Tehran. America is realizing Tehran's strength. Reaching an agreement that can confine its ability to weaponize its nuclear power has become essential.
Washington and Tehran entrusted Muscat to be the sole mediator in these talks. Iran says negotiations will resume once again on April 19th, a positive indication that the talks are possibly on the right track.
Oman always exchanged the messages between the negotiating parties precisely without any modifications. It preserves the secrecy of these communications. That created credibility. Oman has for 5 decades been non-aligned to any party. That gave it that advantage that is not present in many other countries.
This is one of the Middle East's most complicated negotiations. And with the threats coming from both sides, failure in these talks could lead to a possible war. Luckily, Oman is a veteran negotiator, one that has helped bring forward the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal with the United States. Adel El-Makhrouki, CGTN, from Muscat in Oman.
For more on the US-Iran nuclear talks, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Philadelphia, John Ghazvinian is a lecturer in modern Middle East studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Here in Washington, D.C., Barbara Slavin is a distinguished fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at the Stimson Center. With us in the studio, Edmund Ghareeb is an academic and Middle East expert, and Ali Akbar Dareini is a researcher and writer at the Strategic Studies of Public Policy Journal in Tehran and author of Legitimate Deterrence, a thrilling story of Iran's nuclear program. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Ali Akbar Dareini, well, this first round of talks has taken place, and the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, addressed reporters right after those talks. This is some of what he had to say.
Neither we nor the other side want fruitless negotiations, discussions for discussion's sake, time wasting or talks that drag on forever. The American side also said the desired agreement is the one that can be reached in the shortest possible time, but that it will not be easy and will require the necessary will from both sides.
So, Ali Akbar Dareini, both sides very positive about these talks, but with a lot of reservations as well. What is your assessment of these initial discussions?
It was easy negotiations, easy start, but it doesn't mean that the talks are going to be easy in the coming days and weeks. it was beyond expectations what happened in Muscat. But Iran has opened the path of diplomacy. It has agreed to indirect negotiations to make sure to know what are the true intentions of the Trump administration, because Iran has been getting conflicting statements from the White House, from the Trump administration, while President Trump and his special envoy Witkoff have called for verification to make sure that Iran's nuclear program will not be weaponized. Some hawks within his administration, such as Marco Rubio, Foreign Secretary, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, and Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, they have called for full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. So Iran needs to know exactly what America's true intentions are. If the intentions and demands are that Iran agree to verifications, the way is open for serious negotiations. Right. If they insist on this dismantlement, that is a deal breaker.
Right. When you say serious negotiations, the Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani has reported that the next round of talks will take place in Rome. Will these also be indirect talks?
Iran still insists on indirect talks because indirect talks provide more opportunity to know what are America's bottom line before Iran agrees to direct negotiations. This is my understanding at the time being. And my expectation is that in Rome, the two sides may talk about a framework and timeline for the negotiations. This is what we should expect in Rome, but Iran still insists on indirect talks.
Okay, Barbara, the meeting in the Omani capital represents the highest level talks that have taken place between Iran and the United States since 2018. President Trump was asked about these talks on Air Force One this weekend, and this is what he said.
I think they're going okay.
What was your,
well, I can't tell you because nothing matters until you get it done. So I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation is going pretty good.
So President Trump also expressing some positive sentiment there about the outcome of the talks. What is motivating the Trump administration at this time to get a deal done with Iran on the nuclear issue? And he wants it done in 2 months.
Well, our President Trump is notoriously impatient. Look, Iran has enough fissile material to make 6 nuclear weapons if it makes a decision to do so. And so that is concentrating everyone's minds. Of course, Iran would not have this material if Donald Trump had not withdrawn from the agreement in the first place back in 2018. But be that as it may, that adds some urgency. The other thing that adds urgency is that the UN Security Council resolution, which enshrined the previous agreement, expires in October. And this will be the last opportunity to so-called snap back UN sanctions against Iran, before then. And European countries that are still party to the old agreement have talked about snapping back those sanctions. If that deadline passes, given the divisions within the Security Council, it's very unlikely that the international community would be able to continue sanctioning Iran. So this is some of the reason. The other reason, I think, is that Iran is weaker than it was in regional strength, because of the blows to Hamas, to Hezbollah. And so I think it's an opportune time to raise all of these issues, frankly, and it's my understanding that the Trump administration wants to talk about more than the nuclear issue.
And what is your view, Barbara, on this first round of talks? I mean, as I said, both sides are expressing a lot of optimism, but, also with a lot of caveats as well. Are expectations very low?
No, I think expectations are where they should be. This was a meeting. It wasn't really talks. Yeah. It was a way to break the ice. And now, as your guest from Tehran mentioned, there will be perhaps a schedule and a framework for the future talks and a better sense On the Iranian side of what the United States is looking for. Is it to prevent weaponization through intrusive verification and other measures, or is it dismantlement? If it's dismantlement, the talks aren't going to go anywhere.
John, the United States would need to address a legacy of mistrust, especially with President Trump. We have to remember that he was the president who walked away from that initial nuclear agreement, which was known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, and he also reinstated sanctions against Tehran. So how much of a challenge is that to regain Tehran's trust?
Oh, it's an immense challenge, and it's not just an issue of trust for the Trump administration. The current supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, fundamentally does not trust the United States. From his perspective, he has been supreme leader since 1989. One of his very first pieces of education about the United States when he came to power was feeling that he had been tricked or duped by the administration of George H.W. Bush, who said that goodwill begets goodwill. And at the time, President Rafsanjani tried to get hostages released from Lebanon, and Iran got nothing in return for that. Khamenei was similarly skeptical when Obama talked about his unclenched fist, and then was resistant to the idea of talks, decided to allow for some heroic flexibility, revolutionary flexibility, as he called it, and allow talks to go ahead. But of course, those took many years, and once they did produce a result, it was quickly turned around, and it didn't bring Iran very much sanctions relief. Even more recently, as 2 years ago, Iran was supposed to get $6 billion of its own money after releasing some American prisoners, and that didn't happen. Now, not to say that the United States doesn't have plenty of reasons to mistrust Iran, but if you're asking from the Iranian perspective, that is obviously going to be a huge hurdle. But Iran is up against the ropes in a way that it has not been for a very, very long time. It doesn't have the same wiggle room, the same room for maneuver. It is very much on the defensive against the Israeli assaults, as well as economic catastrophe, on the verge of economic catastrophe. It needs sanctions relief. The rial continues to plummet. Clearly he has to show some flexibility, but there is absolutely no trust in that room. We can be sure of that.
Ali Akbar Dareini, is Iran negotiating from a position of weakness right now?
No. It's true that Iranian allies have been weakened in recent months, but it's absolutely wrong to assume that Iran is weaker. While it has opened the path of diplomacy, Iran has dramatically increased its deterrence power. It has unveiled underground missile cities. It has unveiled new air defense systems, and so on. So Iran is not. It's a big miscalculation to assume that Iran is weaker. Iran knows how to defend itself.
Okay, Edmund, what are your thoughts on these talks taking place right now? I mean, President Trump has not even been in office for 100 days, and he wants a nuclear agreement in 2 months. Some of the positions that we're hearing about from the United States appear to be unrealistic. They want Iran to dismantle completely its entire nuclear program. It's called the maximalist position. Iran says that's a non-starter. But realistically, what do you expect to come out of this?
I think both sides find themselves now in a difficult position. Iran is in a very difficult position, as we just heard. They have some of their allies, partners in the region have suffered some heavy blows. Nevertheless, they are still there. At the same time, I think Iran also is facing the threat from Washington. President Trump has warned that they will face destruction in many ways. And so that is also a serious threat. The question is, for the United States also finds itself in a difficult position. There are many countries now who blame the United States for what has happened over this whole situation, as well as others, such as what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank and in the Middle East. So that is also will have some negative consequence. The second thing is, a number of American military experts believe that a conventional war against Iran will not achieve its objectives, not very easily. The United States has decided to attack the Houthis in Yemen, and that was a message that clearly, as Secretary of Defense Hegseth said, that this is a message to Iran in a way, that they see what's happening, the destruction that's taking place in Yemen. But the reality is that Yemen, even Yemen, which is one of the poorest countries in the world, that is fighting with some drones that cost $20,000. They're bringing down missiles that are worth millions of dollars. At the same time, they have also begun to build their own capabilities under the mountains. And again, it's not easy to reach there. This is with the Houthis. How about with Iran, which is a huge country? You need a large number of forces. If we go back to what happened with Iraq in 2003, even Iraq, which was under the most severe sanctions that the world has witnessed at that time, it took quite a while to defeat the Iraqis, who were really isolated in a very difficult situation. Now Iran also has relations with countries such as they have China, such as Russia. Are they getting, where will China and Russia stand? Are they going to provide some assistance, economic, military, weaponry, cyber activity? So basically even the US has to take that into account. That leaves the nuclear issue. So will the US use nuclear weapons? That's the question. The second thing is, you mentioned also, and this is a very important point, they want the US wants the dismantling. But they also want the dismantling of the missile capability, especially medium-range missile capabilities. They also want Iran to stop aiding its allies and partners in the region. And that is going to be very difficult to achieve. No, there is no doubt that I believe the Iranians are willing to agree to probably having the international agencies going and overviewing, investigating, keeping an eye on whether Iran is building nuclear.
But that's happening already, isn't it?
Well, they've stopped, but although they've recently threatened that they were going to expel it unless there is a change.
Right. Okay.
So, but
let me,
that's very dangerous.
let me go to Barbara to get her views on this. Barbara, the Iranian Foreign Ministry held a briefing on Monday, and this is what its spokesman, Ismail Baghei, this is what he said. Let's listen.
If the other side makes commitments regarding the lifting of sanctions, it should not be merely a statement or an empty promise. There must absolutely be guarantees regarding the implementation of those commitments. The issue of guarantees, especially given the history of past breaches of trust, is extremely important.
So, Barbara, is that a fair statement from the Iranians?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, given their experience with the Trump administration reimposing sanctions, pulling out of the previous deal, I think one of the issues that's really interesting is whether we have an opportunity for a broader agreement that would actually lift primary American sanctions on Iran. As has been pointed out, Iran's economy is in very bad shape. And something more durable that would actually get through Congress would give Iran those assurances. One other thing that I wanted to mention, and that is that the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency is going to Iran this week. And I think that visit is going to be very important. If the Iranians show a willingness to resume the kind of cooperation they used to have with the IAEA, I think that would go a long way toward helping to facilitate an agreement.
John, these threats of military action against Iran, of attacking Iran, do you think they're just threats, or will the United States go through with this if they don't get a deal?
I think for much of the last 25 years, these have been empty threats and tactical bluffs. But I think for the very first time, I actually think that there is a real likelihood of military action, either from the United States or Israel or both. I think that 2025 is a decisive year in the history of U.S.-Iran relations. This is the year, as far as I'm concerned, that either we get the kind of quick, high-profile, big headline kind of deal that President Trump seems to want, and that I think Steve Witkoff seems to want as well. Or if we don't, there aren't a lot of other options, given the way that the various pieces of the chessboard have fallen into place. There isn't much else, there's nothing else really left to sanction in Iran. There isn't another maximum pressure campaign that we could spend several years on. Iran, as Barbara pointed out correctly, is very, very advanced now in its nuclear program. And of course, the regional landscape has shifted as well. And there are people in Trump's circle who very much want complete and utter capitulation of the Islamic Republic, whether that's in the form of its complete dismantlement of its nuclear program, which is not going to happen, or short of that, regime change and war. And I think Trump, for the moment, is holding those people off. But if he's not able to secure a deal, I think we're entering very, very dangerous waters. And Iran, let's remember, also has hinted that if snapback sanctions come into place, they would consider pulling out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty.
Right.
They've never suggested before. So we're in much more dangerous waters than I think we've been in before.
Okay, Ali Akbar Dareini, let's look in a bit more detail at Iran's nuclear status right now. The International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the nuclear watchdog, reported in February that Tehran had stockpiled uranium enriched to 60% purity and could swiftly move to 90%, which would then be considered weapons-grade material. The 2015 nuclear deal took nearly 2 years of very intensive negotiations before it was signed. Do you believe that there is a willingness now in Iran to get a deal done quickly?
Yes. Iran is already a nuclear threshold state. That means Iran possesses the materials, the knowledge, the know-how, engineers, scientists, to build a nuclear weapon if it makes a political decision to do so. So the only thing needed to be done is to increase the level of enrichment from 60% to 90+% and make a political decision to build a nuclear weapon. And it can produce that material for a single nuclear weapon in less than a week. But Iran has not chosen that path. Iran has kept the path of diplomacy open. If the intention is to get verification to make sure that Iran's nuclear program will not be weaponized, then a deal could be reached quickly. At the same time, the Americans do know that attacking nuclear facilities in Iran will not produce the results they want. Although B-2 bombers in Diego Garcia can carry GBU-57 bunker buster bombs, some of Iran's nuclear facilities are immune from any attack, including those bunker buster bombs. Isfahan is partly vulnerable. Natanz is partly vulnerable, but at the same time, Iran has built deep underground facilities next to those facilities. So any conventional military attack against Iran's nuclear facilities will not lead to dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. Instead, it will lead to Iran becoming a nuclear power. So under a cost and benefit analysis, I don't think the United States will carry out a military strike. Iran knows how to defend itself. It has made itself prepared for any eventuality, for worst scenarios. But I think now there is a possibility for a deal, particularly an interim deal in the coming days.
Barbara, looking at a possible deal, the United States has made it clear that direct communications will be key to striking a possible deal, and Iran has made it very clear that, you know, with the continued threat of sanctions, what they see as intimidation, what they see as threats, that this will not happen. So do you think that the United States will have to make some early concessions if there is going to be an agreement? And what do you make of the chief U.S. negotiator right now, Steve Witkoff, leading the U.S. negotiating team?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the U.S. is going to have to make any initial concessions, but I think it's very important that they move to direct talks very, very quickly. And I hope that Witkoff will come with a team that is prepared to explain the U.S. bottom line. Witkoff is, you know, he's our envoy to everyone now, and he does not have specific expertise on Iran and certainly on nuclear issues. So I hope that he's bringing a team with him to Rome. Interestingly, J.D. Vance, the vice president, is supposed to be in Rome at the same time as these talks are taking place. So I'm not sure whether he might want to be involved. But it's important that they move to direct talks quickly.
So why isn't Marco Rubio leading these talks?
Well, that's a really good question. You know, on Twitter, people have been joking that, you know, he doesn't do Ukraine, he doesn't do Russia, doesn't do Gaza, he doesn't do Iran, so all he does is deport people. If I were Marco Rubio, I would be feeling a little bit miffed, frankly. Anyway, I think they have to move to direct talks, and they have to get down to specifics very quickly.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.